Welcome into college football smothered and covered. My name is Barrett Salee. I appreciate you checking out the show. We got a big show today. We'll talk to Jake Rowe of DawgsHQ on the On3 network. Get you caught up on what's going on in Athens, not necessarily off the field, but on the field as the Bulldogs look to make it 3 national championships in 4 seasons. Like I say every single week, please follow everybody, listen to everybody. Watch Pate, watch Piquel, watch Bratton, watch O'Gara, Staples, everybody. We want to be part of your college football rotation. We want you to listen to us, watch us, instead of watching people yell about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James or some nonsense like that. Or how the hip dip tackle is now. I don't even know what that means. Like, I didn't know that had a name. I knew what it was. And I know they were talking, like when they started talking yesterday about this hip dip tackle, whatever it is, getting banned, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what tackle are you talking about? But we're on our way to two-hand touch in the NFL. Luckily for the college football world, we are not there yet. But like I said, DawgsHQ, Jake Rowe coming up in a little bit. We will also let you know about realignment. I will give my prediction on when Florida State and Clemson will leave and what will happen moving forward. So that'll be a little bit later in the show. And prayers up to Baltimore with that bridge. That is terrible what's going on up in Baltimore. So pray for those folks up there. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. Check that guy out. Check that Carson Beck shirt out. Go Dogs. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. If you want to get that guy, get a little discount. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. All right. Florida State and Clemson. The ACC, it's like a marriage that is on the way out. The couple is staying together just for the kids. And the couple being the ACC and Florida State/Clemson. Look, it's 2024. Don't judge their marriage. They do things how they want to do. But this is what it is. This is done. Florida State and Clemson will leave. There is no doubt about it. I do think there are at least 5, maybe more teams in the ACC that are behind these two, cheering, clapping, saying, yeah, you guys, you be those front men. You be the ones that blow this whole thing up. And look, it might work. In fact, I do think it will work, at some point. But we don't know when that is. My colleague, Dennis Dodd, former colleague at CBS, Dennis Dodd, has a piece up on CBSSports.com talking about how this works and the potential for what happens moving forward. And this to me is the early part of this story that jumps out. And second paragraph says, insiders do not believe adding Florida State to one of the conferences, the SEC or Big Ten, makes much sense financially, despite the program's strong brand. That is very interesting because the sentence after that, the Seminoles by themselves are not worth messing around with the $60 million being handed out in revenues to SEC schools or $75 million getting paid out to Big Ten institutions. I think that is the most important thing. If you're going to add Florida State or Clemson, you're going to have to convince the other 16 teams that those programs are worth taking a little bit of a pay cut. Are those programs worth taking a little bit of a pay cut? I don't think so. Maybe together you could make that argument, but you're going to try to convince, at this point, you're going to have to convince Florida and South Carolina. Those two are the keys, that taking a slight pay cut by adding these two schools is worth it. Those rivalries are too deep. Those rivalries mean way too much. And I think because of that, they want that air of superiority. I think South Carolina and Florida will be looking at those two schools thinking, wow, we want to be big brother. We want to show you that you're big brother. You don't get to come in to this conference because you're not worth it. That is the ultimate dig to say, yeah, you're not worthy. So convincing those two teams, those two programs is going to be massive. Now, ultimately, does it matter? Probably not. It might, it's one of those things where those two can't hold it up with the way the SEC contract is built. But They're going to try. There's no doubt they're going to try. And I think when spinning it forward, the option that Dennis presents in his story, I think makes more sense. I like to think of Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark as a ninja. He's like Alex Anthopoulos on the college athletics side. The Big 12 option is the one that stands out to me because Brett Yormark actually did a great job with the Big 12. They're set to earn $32 million. You can see it on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. It's the lowest among Power 4, but that is not going to be forever. I think the attraction with the Big 12 is there. It's a strong conference. The foundation is much more stable than the ACC. I think the biggest thing, though, is this. The Big 12 has extended its media rights deal with major national broadcasters, ESPN and Fox, through 2030 and 2031. That might not be that big. That might seem like it's far away. That might seem like it's Star Trek or, Back to the Future, whatever. But the long-term contract renewal is understood to be worth just over $2 billion and will include a sizable pay increase for the schools. What does that mean? That there's already a dedication by the networks to the success of the Big 12. A $2 billion worth incentive. All right. So what? Billable hours are undefeated. Lawyers for Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC start squabbling, start making all that money. The parties come to an agreement to have a nice breakup or as much of a breakup that is clean as possible, and then they move on. How long does something like that take? Well, it takes about 5 years. So to me, that is the likely option here. I don't know if the SEC is going to want Florida State or Clemson. I think the only reason it would be for rivalry's sake, because Florida State and Clemson, South Carolina, and Florida State, Clemson, that's a big rivalry too. I think those matter. 100% those matter. Do they matter enough to tell the SEC teams that are currently members to take a pay cut? And how much is that pay cut? Those are the questions that need to be asked. And ultimately, those will determine if Florida State and Clemson get to the SEC, or perhaps maybe the Big 12 option that Dennis Dodd mentioned in his article on CBSSports.com becomes more realistic by the day and by the year. All right, check this out again. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. You can get this shirt, Georgia, go Dogs. BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. Carson Beck, Heisman frontrunner, Heisman candidate, has lots of gear over there. Viral gear. Things happen. Breaking T has content up, has material, apparel up that night. So go to BreakingT.com/smothered and covered. You can get yours today. Joined now by one of my favorite people on the planet covering Georgia, Jake Rowe, DawgsHQ on the On3 network. What's up, Jake? How are you?
Well, first of all, I very much appreciate you too, Barrett, but don't destroy your credibility by saying too nice things about me. That's just, I did see the other day when I was looking at your Twitter profile, I think you said lacks credibility or no credibility.
Lost all credibility.
I ran
lost
out
all
of
credibility, and then also hack. Get that one a lot too. But see, here's the thing: if you explain it, if you explain it beforehand, then no one's going to be shocked, right?
That's right.
Like I've got Miami people blowing me up from the show on Monday, and they're like, "Lost all credibility. You lost all credibility with this show," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Look at the profile. Like I already know this stuff. It's well established that I don't have credibility." First things first. Let's go with the serious stuff. Trevor Etienne, the arrest over the weekend. I know it's kind of easy to say, "Oh my God, what's going on at Georgia? It's a systemic problem," and all this other stuff. In your mind, is it a problem, or are these just a constant barrage of individual incidents that just keep on happening?
Well, it's tough to know, Barrett, because here's the deal. That the tragedy that happened over a year ago was awful, man. And I mean, we shut the site down for a day, right? Like we were just like, we're not doing it. We're not reporting on anything today. When Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix lost their lives. I mean, that was awful. But at the end of the day, kind of moving past that tragedy, a microscope came with it. And all of a sudden, a speeding ticket that a guy gets in Hartwell, Georgia, 45 minutes away from Athens becomes news. And a speeding ticket here DUIs are always news, but there was a lot of stuff that became news that wouldn't have been news before that. Nobody would have been looking for speeding violations. Nobody would have felt the need to report on those. And that's not me sitting here telling you that that there's anything good about Trevor Etienne getting a DUI, but I mean, let's frame this the right way. We haven't gotten the police report yet. But every indication, at the time that we're talking here, but every indication that we've gotten was that, it was an underage deal. It was, this guy wasn't legally drunk. He wasn't out there endangering people's lives because he was loaded driving on the road. He blew below the legal limit, but since he's 19, 20 years old, it's not, anything that's in your system. There's a zero tolerance policy. It doesn't change the fact, and I'm not sitting here saying, well, Athens Clarke County is targeting, Georgia players. That's not the case. That's the law. Okay. That's the law, and that's fine. He'll have to deal with all of that himself. But to me, it does change the tone of it when you're, when you say DUI, you're thinking somebody's out there going to get somebody killed.
3 times over the limit, driving all over the place. Yeah.
Right. This is not one of those situations. This guy probably, based on what I've heard, was not legally drunk. He wasn't old enough to have any alcohol in the system. So that was the issue. And listen, he'll have to deal with that, and he'll have to learn from that. But I don't think there's like a systemic problem. I don't think there's anything that Georgia is doing to say, hey, to enable these kids to do that. I mean, they suspended guys last year, and they don't do that a lot. Marcus Rosenby-Jack Saint didn't play in the opener after getting a couple of reckless driving violations. Javon Bullard a couple of years ago got suspended for a DUI. So there's definitely been some ramifications for what these guys have done, and there was a good stretch there where they didn't really have it, but now they've got another one from a guy that's been on campus for a couple months.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just incidents over and over again. But you're right. Like, individual things are kind of magnified. I will say this, though. If you get caught with driving with a suspended license or double parked, you're an idiot. Period. End of story. Yeah. That is those two things. And they pop up a lot with college kids. Like, go get your license. Don't let it lapse. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And it happens at every single school. And then if you're double parked, you should be jailed. Just end of story. Because, dude, I was at the airport, I bet it's like 3 weeks ago, coming back from Disney. There was a dually that almost took up 3 spaces.
Yeah.
And I was like, seriously, I need to call this in, and that guy needs to go to jail because you're a horrible human being.
I think we need to rebrand it as like 4th degree attempted murder, because you're literally trying to give me a heart attack right now. You're trying to get me to stroke out because I'm going to lose my mind.
100%. Those people are the worst kind of humans. All right. So, Carson has all this Heisman hype. I think him and Quinn have kind of gone back and forth as, the favorites or whatever. And to me, and I've said this on my show a lot, if Carson Beck wins the Heisman, something went wrong for Georgia, because he shouldn't have to. With that said, what is his ceiling? I mean, do you think it's even possible? And really, we talk about Carson being an NFL draft pick, but what does he actually have to show for Georgia to win a national championship?
Well, here's where I'll push back on that. I would think if Carson Beck had last year's schedule, I would totally agree with you. I would say that's there. But when Georgia plays Alabama at Alabama, Texas at Texas, and Ole Miss at Ole Miss in September, October, November, respectively, those are 3 games that are going to be ranked matchups. They're going to be high profile games, and they're all on the road. And I think, if Georgia finds a way to win 2 of 3 or 3 of 3 and Carson Beck plays well in all of them, I mean, I could see it. I mean, I really could. And I was a guy that was kind of defending Carson Beck at last year simply because of Stetson Bennett, because, Georgia tried to run Stetson Bennett off twice, right? Georgia fans tried to run Stetson Bennett off a dozen times.
Including in the national championship game in which they won.
100%. And the most, so some of the most misery I've ever seen from Georgia fans was after that 2021 national championship, because Stetson came back. They were that hard on that guy that they were like, man, move on. We want to get to the next phase. And he comes back and he sets records and he's awesome. And first ever off season of his entire career that he got first team reps. Well, coming into this year, I wrote a column like immediately when Carson Beck was named the starter. I was like, Georgia fans, I hope you learned your lesson with Stetson Bennett, that you got to be patient. There's some things that this guy's going to get a chance to see that he hasn't seen yet. Much like Stetson Bennett, he had never gone through a full offseason of being the guy. This is a first-year starter who has not played meaningful football in like 3 or 4 years. And that showed at some time. There were times when he was checked down Charlie early in the year. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it played out. But it ultimately became this kind of thing where he got better as the year went on. Georgia got better in the red zone as the year went on. They laid a little bit of an egg in the national championship, and I think that's a lot of not national championship, SEC championship, and I think a lot of guys shoulder some blame with that, including Carson Beck. I think he logged on to Brock Bowers a little bit, maybe Lab McConkey too. I think Mike Bobo got a little conservative when Amarius Mims went out, and it didn't completely work out. But I have really high expectations for him coming into this year, because there were a lot of kinks worked out in Carson Beck last year that I believe, when you give a quarterback a full season of film and, moves, counter moves, all those things that defenses use to deal with him, an intelligent guy. I mean, I think Carson Beck is going to have a very, very big year. I like the weapons that he has. And ultimately, I think those 3 massive football games, in addition to, having to, get a chance to play Tennessee and Auburn at home and some other games, I think those games will, if he plays well, and then we'll keep him in the Heisman discussion for sure.
Have you seen that Lambo around campus?
I have not. I've yet to lay eyes on it personally. I'm shocked that he bought it, honestly. Like I thought that there would be like a lease or like a maybe a, I don't know about a brand agreement or anything, but some sort of like short term, 8,000 miles a year type deal. But apparently he bought it.
I mean, look, he's a car guy. He even said he was a car guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like Lambo to me, we're both old dudes. That seems like really hard to get in and out of.
Yeah.
Like my old knees seem like that.
Yeah.
That's just going to hurt a little bit.
I thought about my knees. Let's get a little bit of a lift on it so I can just kind of roll out of it. Get out of it on one knee.
Get 35s on a Lambo and see what happens. Oh, all right. So like sticking with the Carson, the offense, like what's different? How is it going to look? What is Mike Bobo going to add this year that'll make it look a little different?
Well, I think, the guy we talked about off the top, Trevor Etienne, I think he changes some things for the offense, because he's much more of he brings a James Cook element to the offense that Georgia didn't have. And honestly, I think maybe even a little bit more than Cook is a little bit more of a make you miss guy. So I like that aspect. He's a little bit more stout than James Cook was. But, I think that's a huge help for him. I mean, one thing that Carson didn't benefit from last year was the ability to toss it to a running back or to find that mismatch with a running back. I mean, Stetson hit Kenny McIntosh, over 500 yards receiving, for Kenny McIntosh, most, prolific receiving season for a Georgia running back ever. So I think that's big. Obviously doesn't have Brock Bowers and Lab McConkey, but they added Colby Young, who is absolutely shredding it in preseason. In spring camp. He is a kid from Miami, has 10 touchdowns over the past couple years. They love him. They love what he's doing. You get Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett into their second year in the system, second year with the same quarterback. You get Dylan Bell, who, I feel like is an absolute stud in Georgia circles, but I don't know that everybody else really understands how good of a football player he is and how many roles he filled for Georgia last year. When Georgia was short at running back, they're handing the ball to this guy. When Lab McConkey gets dinged up and Arian Smith struggling, this guy's out there, going for 100 yards at Tennessee. So he's a special player. And I think when you put all of those weapons together, and 7 offensive linemen that started or 6 offensive linemen that have started, or played over 300 snaps last year. I mean, there's a lot to be, like about the Georgia offense, and they're a little bit young at tailback, but everything else, especially offensively, there are no questions.
You're what, 2 weeks into spring practice or whatever it is. Has anything on the defensive side of the ball, I guess, has anything surprised you? You hearing anything stood out, position changes, anything sort of stand out to you from a defensive standpoint?
Freshman cornerback Ellis Robinson, the number one cornerback in the country per everybody, and one of the top prospects in the country. I feel like, I always feel like it's tough for a young player at cornerback. My partner over at DawgsHQ, Rusty Mansell, says the farther you get from the football, sometimes the tougher it is to make a move. But Ellis Robinson seems to be kind of generating some buzz there. Georgia has an opening at one of the cornerback spots. Dalen Everett started all 14 games last year. Julian Humphrey played a lot. Daniel Harris played some of that Orange Bowl and looked really good. Ellis Robinson, I think, is going to end up giving those guys all they can handle at that position. And he's a special talent. I mean, he's everything you want in an elite cornerback. That's probably – I didn't expect it to happen this soon, but he's a polished kid, so I guess it makes some sense. Another thing I would kind of point to, and it's not really as much as a surprise, is kind of like I'm really interested to see how this plays out, is KJ Bolden, another true freshman. Again, you've got a starting spot open right there at one of the safety spots. Malachi Starks is going to be one of them. Can KJ Bolden kind of make that move? And that's still to be determined, but that's the guy I'm really kind of watching, down the stretch, because I think that's very much key for Georgia's defense.
I mean, Kirby's not married to starters. I mean, we saw towards the end of last season, you started seeing some younger guys start rolling through there too. So, I mean, that's one of those things too. I don't think folks realize that, Georgia has built itself to Alabama, like where it does not matter who's gone. There's somebody else. It's the same dude or even better. It just kind of replicates upon itself. Last thing, you mentioned the schedule. We're in the 12-team playoff era. I say consistently that fan bases should not expect national championships. They should expect to be in the discussion in late November. How does the Georgia fan base feel about that? Because to me, the feel I get just down here in Smyrna is that nothing short of a national championship would be satisfying. And I try to talk them down from that every single chance I get, because you got to have a lot of luck.
They want that 7-letter word so bad that they can't stand it. They want to be called a dime.
I know which one it is.
So bad. I mean, it is. They had a chance last year. It didn't have to happen like that. It never was. But it was always going to happen like that. When Georgia was going to have that win streak broken last year, it was always going to be, when you build yourself up to be the most or one of the 2 or 3 most talented teams in the country, when you lose, it was never going to be you were just outclassed. It was going to be you didn't play well enough to win. And that's what happened in the SEC championship game. And that's why it's there. That's why Georgia's got a 1-game win streak and not a 30-whatever game win streak. But they want a dynasty so bad, and they know they need 3 of 4 or 3 of 5 to get there. And that's just where we are. And I think, I think the college football playoff, the new 12-team playoff, is going to have to sink in for them just a little bit. I think they're going to have to understand how tough that is and how tough it is to play an SEC championship game. I'm fascinated by the idea of and to see how it's going to work, because are we going to end up with a team that's not playing on conference championship weekend that gets that little bit of extra time, because there is another week in there, right? And are those teams that don't play on conference championship weekend that get in to the playoff are going to be in better shape than the loser of the championship game if that team can get in? So it's going to be fascinating to see how that works out. But I think Georgia's built to play in a playoff. I think they're a type of team that's got that kind of depth. They're that versatile. They can play a little, pound the rock ball. They can throw it around. And I fully expect Georgia to make the playoff. But I do tend to agree with you. Georgia fans aren't gonna take it. Like not the diehards. They're just not gonna do it. It's national championship. We need a dynasty. We want to be known as that. But ultimately, I think if you're Georgia, you should. I think the conversation may be shortchanging a little bit. I think you're looking to make it pretty much. I mean, It's going to be tough to make it every year, but you want to see probably 4 out of 5 years if you're a Georgia fan, Georgia making the playoff at the very least and giving itself a chance to win.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when Georgia getting to the SEC championship game was far-fetched.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's like, and then Mark Richt was great. Mark Richt was the savior for what, 9 years, even though, I don't know how many they didn't win. It was like, what, 1 or 2 that they won.
Yeah.
And then he got run off. And obviously there's reasons for that. Perspective is something that has to stay in the top of everybody's mind, especially in this new era, which we don't really know how this whole thing's going to work out. Like you said, teams that don't make the conference championship games might be in actually really good spots. So we'll see how it goes. Jake, let everybody know how to consume your stuff, where they can find you.
Come on over to DawgsHQ.com. And, we've got a 5-man staff. We do, you got a YouTube channel. We do shows. We got the Georgia show. We got Bark After Dark, podcast form as well, wherever you get your podcasts, and produce a lot of content, man. And a lot of it, is behind a paywall, but significant amount of it is not behind a paywall either. Got one of the best message boards out there as well, and a site that's growing 100 miles an hour. We're excited about it. So come see us, come check us out. I
hear you had a good guest on Bark After Dark yesterday.
Heard about that guy. Yeah. We're just got the internet buzzing, hot in the streets is what they say.
Jake, appreciate it.
You got it, buddy.
That'll do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. I appreciate you checking the show out today. If you have not rated the show, give us 5 stars on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe all over the place. You know how to get your podcasts. You know where to watch your shows online. So please give us a look. Share the show. If you don't like the show, negative review, totally cool with that too. I love constructive criticism. It is the best motivator and best way to give you, the college football fan, the content that you want. Talk to you Wednesday, everybody.